My mom asked about my wedding, not knowing it already happened. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. So, my mother said, lifting her mimosa like she was opening a board meeting. Have you two finally decided whether we're doing the vineyard in June or the hotel in September? Emily's hand tightened around mine under Diane's white tablecloth. I kept my face still, but my wedding ring pressed warm against my palm, where I'd turned it inward before we walked in. Across from us, my sister Marissa wore the smile people wear when they expect someone else to be corrected. Aunt Elena sat at the end of the table, quiet, one hand on her coffee cup like she already knew the table might flip. It was Sunday brunch in my mother's dining room, the one that always looked staged for resale. Hydrangeas in the center, linen napkins folded like swans, bacon arranged in perfect, overlapping rows. Everything in Diane's house looked like it was waiting to be admired, including Diane. I'm Daniel. I'm 30, and for most of my life I've been the son who kept things smooth. I work as a physical therapist at a rehab clinic. My days are ordinary in the best possible way. I help people stand again after surgeries and car wrecks. At work, effort matters. Pain is visible. Progress is honest. At home, with Diane, none of that logic ever worked. She liked image more than truth. She liked gestures more than care. And she loved milestones only when she could host them, photograph them, and retell them as proof of what a remarkable mother she'd been. Graduations, birthdays, holidays, it was never enough to live them. She had to own them. So when Emily and I got engaged 8 months earlier, my mother didn't hear, "We're building a life." She heard, "At last, an event." I would have told her about the wedding already if all she'd done was overstep. If all she'd done was criticize Emily's dress ideas or push for a bigger guest list, maybe I would have swallowed it the way I always had. But by the time we sat at that brunch table, I had screenshots, bank photos, voicemails, and one courthouse certificate folded inside my jacket. Diane smiled at me over her glass. "Daniel, you drift when details matter." I looked at my mother, then at the woman I'd already promised my life to, and felt my pulse settle. Then my mother smiled and asked the question that ended everything. People who meet Diane now call her elegant, organized, the kind of woman who has standards. That's the polished version. The private version is that my mother can turn love into a performance review in under 30 seconds. When I was 8, she made me change shirts 3 times before a church photo because the blue one washed me out and the red one made me look stubborn. I didn't know what stubborn looked like on cotton, but I remember standing on my bed while she snapped hangers like verdicts. Marissa, for years older and already fluent in my mother's moods, leaned in the doorway and said, "Just wear what she wants. It takes less time." That was the first lesson in our house. Not honesty, efficiency. Give Diane what she wants, and the weather improves. When I was 12, I told her I liked drawing and wanted an art class after school. Diane smiled and said, "That's sweet, Daniel, but let's keep hobbies realistic. You're not Marissa." Marissa, of course, had piano, debate camp, and a bedroom the size of my current living room. She was our mother's proof of concept, polished, social, useful. I was the easier child to manage because I learned to manage myself first. If I got upset, Diane called me sensitive. If I disagreed, she called me dramatic. If I withdrew, she told relatives I was so quiet and good, as if silence were a personality instead of a survival skill. By college, I had built my whole identity around being low maintenance. Even after I moved out, the pattern held. Diane praised me in public for being dependable, then privately reminded me I lacked ambition. She called my job choice admirable but not exceptional. Once, when I bought a used Honda and was proud I'd paid cash, she ran her fingers across the dashboard and said, "Well, at least no one can accuse you of vanity." Then I got engaged, and for one dangerous week, I thought maybe she was happy. She hugged me too long at dinner. She cried on cue. She told the waiter to bring champagne, and then squeezed Emily's hand with a smile that made Emily stiffen. "I always knew Daniel would need a strong woman guiding him," Diane said. I should have recognized that engagement smile for what it really was. Emily became a threat to my mother the second she proved she couldn't be managed. We met at a friend's game night, and she beat me at Scrabble while eating grocery store hummus straight from the container. No performance, no flirting, no trying to seem impressive. She was a school counselor, practical to the bone, funny in a dry way, and almost impossible to rush. When people got louder, Emily got quieter. When people got dramatic, she got precise. Diane's first complaint was disguised as concern. "She's very nice," she told me after meeting Emily for coffee, "but I worry she doesn't challenge you." I asked what that meant, and Diane gave me the look she reserved for obvious failures. "Daniel, you've always needed someone who elevates you." Elevates. As if Emily were an accessory that failed to improve resale value. The truth was simpler. Emily didn't orbit Diane. She answered questions directly, declined things without apologizing for 3 paragraphs, and never laughed at my mother's little public put-downs. At Thanksgiving, when Diane said, "Emily, I suppose school counseling is rewarding, even if it's not exactly ambitious," Emily took a sip of water and said, "Helping kids not hate themselves feels ambitious enough for me." I almost choked on my stuffing. Diane smiled like a woman being photographed with someone she intended to blacklist later. What made it worse was that Emily saw things in my family I had spent years explaining away. She noticed how Diane interrupted only certain people. She noticed how I went half silent at my mother's table, as if every sentence needed clearance. One night, after Diane had texted me 6 times asking whether I was serious about Emily, Emily asked, "Does she always talk like you're a project she financed?" I laughed because it was accurate and uncomfortable. "She means well," I said automatically. Emily looked at me for a long moment. "Sometimes means well" is what people say when they're scared to use better words. Still, I wanted so badly for the engagement to soften Diane that I kept translating her. Then, after a venue tour, she looked Emily up and down and said, "You're lovely, dear." I just pictured Daniel with someone more polished. The first time Diane called Emily temporary, I laughed too late. The engagement lasted about 48 hours before it stopped belonging to us. Emily wanted something small, immediate family, close friends, good food, no theatrical first dance, no drone footage, no monogrammed cocktail napkins. I wanted the same. After spending all week in a rehab clinic helping people do basic things without pain, the last thing I wanted was a wedding that felt like a quarterly earnings call. Diane heard small and treated it like a temporary symptom. She arrived at our apartment with 3 binders, a venue spreadsheet, and the number of a planner named Chantal who, according to my mother, handled discreet society weddings. Emily blinked at the binders. "I made coffee because that's what I do when conflict enters a room in heels." "You'll thank me later," Diane said, spreading swatches across our table. Intimate can still mean elevated. We don't want people assuming money is tight. Emily said, calmly, "We're not worried about people assuming things." Diane didn't look at her. "That's because you haven't hosted before." Within 2 weeks, my mother had tripled our guest count with people I barely knew. Couples from her charity board, cousins I hadn't seen in years, neighbors who supported young love. She wanted a vineyard outside the city because the downtown garden room Emily loved was, in Diane's words, pleasant but forgettable. Then came the money strings. Diane offered to help. With the wedding in the same tone, people offer to hold a ladder after loosening the bolts. She insisted deposits go on her rewards card so she could track everything in one place. She said it was more efficient if vendors used her assistant email. She called our budget adorable. The ugliest part was how she insulted Emily while sounding benevolent. "I know wedding planning can overwhelm girls from modest backgrounds. Sweetheart, satin photographs better than crepe if your shoulders are broad. Daniel has never been detail-oriented, so thank goodness I'm involved." I should have stopped it then. Instead, I compromised in 100 tiny ways because that was my native language. When Diane held out her hand and said, "Send me the deposit money tonight, and I'll handle the venue," I did. That was the moment we handed her the knife. The first time I saw the blade move, I still tried to call it clumsy. Emily's mother, Sandra, phoned on a Tuesday night while Emily was chopping onions. I could hear the strain in her voice from across our kitchen. "Did we do something?" Sandra asked. "If the dinner is only for immediate family, that's okay. I just wish someone had told us kindly." Emily frowned at me. "What dinner?" Sandra hesitated. "Your future mother-in-law called. She said the wedding plans changed because Daniel couldn't afford the guest list your side expected, and that maybe a smaller rehearsal dinner would spare everyone embarrassment." The knife in Emily's hand stopped midair. "My side expected?" I took the phone, asked Sandra to repeat it, and wrote down every word. Diane had called her 2 days earlier, From her cell, at 8:17 p.m. Emily's mother was too gracious to accuse, so she just sounded hurt. That almost made it worse. When I confronted Diane, she gave me the weary little sigh she used when she wanted me to feel 12 again. Oh, for heaven's sake, Daniel, I was smoothing things over. Sandra sounded anxious, and I didn't want her misunderstanding the scale. Families from different backgrounds sometimes hear numbers differently. I stared at her. You told Emily's mother I couldn't afford my own wedding. I implied no such thing. Honestly, your sensitivity is exhausting. Emily told me to let it go. Not because she was okay, but because she could already see the trap. Diane always made the first fight about tone, never facts. If I pushed harder, she'd cry, and somehow the issue would become whether I had humiliated my mother. So I swallowed it, and for 3 days I nearly convinced myself it was a one-off. Then the florist emailed me. Subject line, confirming your revised floral direction. Inside was a pleasant note thanking Daniel for clarifying that Emily wanted less formal arrangements because she had simple taste and would be happiest with grocery store greenery and no peonies. The florist included the forwarded thread. It was from an account called Dan and Emily Wedding. Team@gmail.com. The signature line read, on behalf of the couple, Diane Mercer. Then the florist forwarded me an email I never wrote. I printed the florist thread before I drove to Diane's house because I knew if I didn't hold paper in my hand, she'd make me doubt what I'd read. She opened the door wearing a cream sweater set and the expression she used for unannounced salespeople. Daniel, you could have called. I walked past her into the kitchen and laid the pages on the island. What is this? Diane glanced down, then reached for her glasses slowly. Oh, that. My voice came out flatter than I felt. You created an email pretending to be me. You told a florist Emily has simple taste and can't understand luxury options. Diane took a measured breath. I was trying to keep things aligned. Vendors upsell. Emily gets flustered. You disappear when details pile up. I solved the problem. You created the problem. No, Daniel, she said, finally letting irritation crack through. I prevented one. You are about to make a public commitment with a woman who thinks a wedding at City Hall and supermarket flowers is romantic because she has no frame of reference. Someone needed standards. It wasn't just the insult to Emily. It was the certainty. Diane wasn't scrambling for excuses because, in her mind, she had jurisdiction. I asked for the venue receipt. She said it was in process. I asked why Sandra got that call. Diane said she was managing class friction. I asked whether there were any other emails or calls I didn't know about. She looked right at me and said, if you want me involved, you accept how I do things. When I got back to our apartment, Emily was sitting on the floor with her laptop open and a legal pad full of notes. She had the florist email printed too, plus screenshots from a vendor portal showing our garden room hold had been canceled that afternoon. Not by us, by family coordinator. There was also a voicemail transcription attached from Diane's number. Hi, this is Daniel's mother. We need to release that room. The bride is leaning casual, and I won't finance a picnic. Emily looked tired, not shocked. I need you to hear me without defending her, she said. This is sabotage, not help. Then she added the sentence I'd been avoiding all month. You don't have to give her this day. An hour later, Annalena called with something even worse. Annalena didn't waste words. Your mother used your money for something else, she said. And before you say I'm overreacting, I'm looking at the statement. Elena had been at Diane's house that afternoon because Diane wanted help sorting mail before brunch with her garden club. Apparently, Diane had left a bank envelope mixed in with wedding brochures, and Elena recognized my transfer amount because I'd mentioned it weeks earlier. I took photos, Elena said. You can be mad later. Emily and I drove to Elena's condo in silence. She met us at the door in slippers, holding her phone like evidence in a trial. On the screen were 2 clear images, my transfer of $4,200 marked venue deposit, and, less than an hour later, 2 outgoing payments from Diane's account, $2, $600 to Marissa, Memo Condo Special Assessment, and $1,200 to the Briar Glen Women's Gala Table Fund. I stared so long my eyes watered. Emily asked, could Diane have moved it back? Elena shook her head. Maybe, but she didn't pay your venue. And this isn't bookkeeping sloppiness. Those memos are typed. The betrayal landed in layers. First the money, then the lie. Then the humiliating realization that some part of me was still shocked my mother could be this deliberate. I said Marissa must not know where the money came from. Elena gave me a look over her glasses. Maybe, maybe not. But your mother has always treated your milestones like family inventory. We sat at Elena's kitchen table until nearly midnight, surrounded by tea mugs, printouts, and the quiet grief that comes when a truth finally stops being deniable. Emily didn't push me. She just rested her ankle against mine while Elena explained how to lock down vendors, change passwords, and document everything. Then she said, gently, "You two could still choose yourselves." A courthouse wedding had never been my fantasy. I had wanted my family there once. I had wanted my mother to behave like she loved me more than she loved control. But by then, a private ceremony no longer felt like giving something up. It felt like protecting the only part of this that was still ours. Emily reached for my hand. "We can marry quietly," she said, "and tell them when we're ready. Or never." We picked a date no one in my family would suspect. We got married on a rainy Thursday at the county courthouse 3 weeks later. No strings quartet, no vineyard, no seating chart, no mother adjusting cuff links like she was setting a museum display. Just me, Emily, Aunt Elena, a clerk with kind eyes, and the soft tap of water against tall windows that blurred the whole city into watercolor. Emily wore a simple ivory dress she found on sale and altered herself. I wore the navy suit I'd planned for the real wedding, the one Diane said was too plain for formal photography. Aunt Elena brought a little bouquet from the florist my mother had insulted. White ranunculus, eucalyptus, nothing extravagant, everything perfect. We stood under the county seal and held hands while the clerk read the vows in a voice that sounded practiced but not empty. I thought I would feel anger there, maybe grief sharp enough to ruin the moment. Instead, I felt something steadier. Relief. Just relief that every person in that room was there because they loved us, not because they wanted a story to tell later. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook anyway. Emily smiled, that tiny private smile I had fallen in love with years earlier, the one that meant I could stop performing and just be a person. I promised to be honest even when honesty embarrassed me, to protect our home from chaos, even when the chaos came wearing family colors. She promised me calm without passivity, truth without cruelty, and a life where peace counted as success. Aunt Elena cried first, then Emily, then, humiliatingly, me. Afterward, we ate lemon cake from a bakery near the courthouse and took 2 blurry photos under an awning because the rain wouldn't let up. Emily tucked our marriage certificate into a manila envelope and held it against her chest like something alive. Then my phone lit up with Diane's name. I answered. "Daniel," she said briskly, as if no sacred thing had happened in the last hour. "I moved your tasting to Saturday because the chef had a cancellation, and I will not have Emily choosing linens without me." I looked at my wife under that awning and understood the depth of what my mother had lost. She was planning a wedding that no longer existed. Being secretly married was stranger than I expected. Not because it felt wrong. It didn't. At home, it felt so right it almost glowed. Emily's toothbrush beside mine. Our certificate locked in the fire safe. Our rings turned outward once the blinds were drawn. It all felt sane in a way wedding planning never had. The strange part was acting normal around Diane, while she kept producing ideas for an event she thought she still controlled. She sent venue charts at 6 a.m. She texted me tuxedo fabrics with captions like, "Navy is safe if Emily refuses real elegance." She left a voicemail saying she'd rescued us from a mediocre photographer by putting down a temporary deposit with a man who usually shot charity galas. She spoke about our wedding the way generals speak about territory. I delayed the reveal because I knew enough by then to trust my own dread. Diane doesn't stop at one offense. She layers them. If I told her too early, she'd deny, cry, rewrite, and hide whatever we hadn't found yet. So Emily and I played time until the truth finished surfacing. The caterer called asking whether we still intended to make the overdue payment from the invoice sent on the 12th. I found nothing in my email. Emily checked the shared folder. Nothing. When I asked where the invoice had gone, the coordinator said, "Your mother requested all billing be sent directly to her after she mentioned there had been confusion with your finances." My finances. That same evening, while Diane was in the powder room during dinner at her house, a notification flashed across her open laptop on the breakfast counter. I would love to say I looked away. I didn't. The preview line read, "Revised seating for donor table." Donor table. In the spreadsheet visible behind it were columns labeled family, board, medical, city, and press. My wedding wasn't organized by relationships. It was organized by influence. When Diane came back, I closed the laptop too fast. She noticed. Later that night, Elena called and said she had another stack of mail my mother had asked her to drop at the post office. "There's an invoice in here from the hotel ballroom," she said. "And Daniel? There's a planning spreadsheet clipped to it." When I opened Diane's spreadsheet, one line made my stomach drop. The line item was labeled image management. It sat between floral upgrades and rehearsal wine service like it belonged there. Under it were 3 payments: $850 to a PR consultant I'd never heard of, $600 to a social media photographer for pre-event content, and $1,100 to Briar Glen Club for sponsor placement. My wedding, apparently, had become a branding exercise. Below that was the part that turned my stomach cold. Transfer received from Daniel for $1,200. Transfer reallocated temporarily, family need. There was no venue payment listed anywhere on the sheet. Elena brought the paperwork to our apartment in a grocery bag because she said walking in with a folder would make her too angry to drive. We spread everything across the coffee table: the spreadsheet, the hotel invoice, screenshots of the florist email, the caterer's overdue notice, and bank photos Elena had already taken. Emily opened her laptop and added texts Diane had sent her directly. Don't confuse simple with special. People notice standards more than sentiment. Trust me, later you'll thank me for not letting this look provincial. Then Emily played a voicemail she'd saved but never told me about. It was from the week after our engagement. Diane's voice was warm in the theatrical way it gets when she's lying on purpose. "Sandra, I know Emily may present this as her choice, but Daniel has always needed structure. I'd hate for her family to misread budget limits as judgment. We're doing our best." Emily stopped the recording halfway through. "That message made my mom cry," she said quietly. "She thought I'd asked you for more than you could afford." I wrote dates. May 4th, Sandra call, 8:17 p.m. May 6th, fake florist email, 6:42 a.m. May 9th, venue deposit transferred, 10:12 a.m. May 9th, Marissa condo payment, 10:53 a.m. May 9th, gala table payment, 11:04 a.m. May 12th, caterer invoice withheld. May 18th, donor seating sheet created. June 3rd, courthouse marriage. By midnight, we had a timeline, a folder, and one brutal understanding. Diane had redirected our money, damaged Emily's family, lied to vendors, and converted our marriage into a stage for herself. Then I heard the message she left Emily's mother at 11:43 p.m. I listened to that voicemail 3 times because the first time, I still hoped I'd misunderstood it. "Hi Sandra, it's Diane. I'm calling woman to woman. I think Emily is rushing Daniel because she knows he won't say no. He's a caretaker by nature, and sometimes people mistake that for strength. I'd hate for your daughter to build a marriage on pressure. There are lies that insult you, and then there are lies that rearrange other people's memories of you." That message did both. In 2 sentences, my mother made Emily look manipulative, made me sound weak, and positioned herself as the only adult in the room. I sat on our couch with the printed transcript hanging from my fingers. Emily sat beside me, not touching me yet. "We don't have to expose her," she said. "We can cut contact, mail back anything she gave us, and disappear into our own life. That's a valid option." It was. Part of me wanted exactly that. Lock the door. Change passwords. Send one sterile message with a photo of the certificate attached, and then vanish. No scene. No audience for Diane to claim I staged. But silence has a cost when the person hurting you survives by controlling the story. If we disappeared quietly, Diane would tell people Emily isolated me. She would say I was ashamed of a small wedding. She would turn my silence into her innocence and call it heartbreak. Aunt Elena, who had been pretending to read a magazine while absolutely listening, finally lowered it. "You don't owe anyone a spectacle, but you also don't owe a liar the last word." The next morning, Marissa texted, "Mom is killing herself trying to pull this together, and you're being impossible." I stared at the screen, thinking about the condo transfer. Whether Marissa knew everything or just enough almost didn't matter. She was still standing where she always stood, between my mother's behavior and its consequences. Emily leaned against the counter and said, "Whatever you choose, I'm with you. Peace first, pride second." I looked at our certificate in the safe, then at the stack of evidence on the table, and understood that peace and truth were no longer separate choices. So when Diane invited us to Sunday brunch, I said yes. Diane staged brunch the way other people stage interventions. By the time Emily and I arrived, the dining room was set with her wedding china, the expensive one with a silver border she only used when there was something to prove. Marissa was already there in a beige silk blouse, perched straight-backed like a loyal witness. Aunt Elena sat near the window with a look that said she had packed her patience in measured doses. On the sideboard sat 3 thick binders and a foam board with fabric swatches clipped to it. Not our colors, not Emily's taste. Diane had arranged champagne glasses beside the binders like she expected applause. "Perfect," she said when we walked in. "Now we can make real decisions." Brunch moved like a script. Diane poured coffee, asked me about work with that brittle interest she uses when she's waiting to get to the thing she actually values, then opened binder 1. "I narrowed the venue options," she said. "The hotel is stronger for parking, but the vineyard photographs better. If we move quickly, I can still secure the ballroom hold and the donor table pricing." Emily asked, evenly, "Why would our wedding need donor table pricing?" Diane waved a hand. "Networking happens organically when thoughtful people gather. Daniel's career may not revolve around visibility, but that doesn't mean we should waste an opportunity." There it was again, that little cut wrapped in strategy. Then she slid a printout across the table. It was a seating chart. Under family were 4 names. Under board were 12. Not one person from Emily's mother's side appeared anywhere. I felt something inside me go still. Marissa, sensing tension and mistaking it for leverage, chimed in. "Mom's just trying to make this look like you too." Emily asked, "Like us or like her?" Diane gave her a smile polished enough to blind. "Darling, one day you'll understand that family events have ripple effects beyond romance." She turned back to me, lifted her mimosa, and used the tone that had ended arguments my entire childhood. "Now, tell me honestly, when are you finally getting married?" Then my mother asked when I was finally getting married. I didn't raise my voice. That was the first thing that threw her. "We got married 3 weeks ago," I said. Silence doesn't always sound empty. Sometimes it sounds like crystal tightening in a woman's hand. Diane's glass touched the saucer with a tiny sharp click. Marissa actually laughed once, like a cough wearing makeup. "What an ugly joke," Diane said. Emily turned her ring outward and rested her hand on the table. Aunt Elena reached into her tote bag and placed a certified copy of our marriage certificate on the runner between the hydrangeas and the jam. I watched my mother's eyes move over the seal, the date, our signatures. For one astonishing second, her face had no expression at all. Then the mask came back. "You did this to hurt me." "No," I said. "We did it because you turned our wedding into your project, took our money, lied to vendors, and tried to poison Emily's family against her." Marissa snapped. "Mom helped because you too were drowning." Emily opened a folder and slid out the florist thread, the caterer notice, and screenshots of the fake planning email Diane created in my name. I laid down the bank photos showing my $4,200 transfer and the outgoing payments to Marissa and the Briar Glen Gala less than an hour later. Diane glanced at the page and said, too quickly, "Temporary reallocation." "To my sister's condo?" I asked. Marissa's face changed. "What?" Then Emily played the voicemail on speaker. "Sandra, I know Emily may present this as her choice." Diane lunged for the phone. I pulled it back first. Aunt Elena added the planning spreadsheet with image management highlighted in yellow and the donor seating chart clipped beneath it. "If you'd like, Diane, I can also explain why the hotel invoice was hidden in your outgoing mail." My mother looked around the table the way performers do when a crowd stops behaving correctly. "You're all being manipulated," she said. "Emily wanted something secret and cheap, and now she's using paperwork to justify humiliating me." I folded my hands and said, "No, Mom. I'm done letting you narrate me." That was when Marissa opened the second envelope. Inside the second envelope was a photocopy of the transfer memo Diane had typed for Marissa's payment, plus a text chain Elena had pulled from Diane's home iPad while helping print labels the week before. "MOM, I moved money from Daniel's deposit. I'll replace it before he notices." "Marissa, he notices everything when it's Emily." "MOM, then let him be dramatic in private." Marissa, I still need the condo paid by Friday. Marissa went white first, then red. You went through Mom's messages? Elena didn't blink. Your mother left the iPad open while asking me to print fake vendor notes. Spare me. I didn't know she hadn't paid it back, Marissa said. But the sentence collapsed halfway through because none of us had asked that. She knew enough. Maybe not every detail, but enough to keep the cash warm while I got called difficult. Diane stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. This is theft. This is entrapment. You impersonated me, I said. You lied to Emily's mother. You redirected our money. You built a guest list around donors. And you married that girl behind my back. That girl. Emily exhaled once through her nose, the closest thing to fury she ever showed in public. I'm your son's wife, she said. Learn the noun or lose access to us permanently. Diane turned to me, abandoning refinement entirely. After everything I've done for you, you choose her? There it was. The sentence under every sentence. Not are you hurt? Not why didn't you trust me? Just the oldest demand in our house. Choose me over your own reality. I stood. My knees felt weak, but my voice didn't. I'm not choosing between women, I said. I'm choosing truth over control. The fallout wasn't cinematic. Emily and I put the documents back in our folder. Elena took her purse. Marissa kept saying, this didn't have to happen like this, which is what people say when they mean consequences are embarrassing. Diane followed us to the foyer insisting she was the victim of cruelty, ingratitude, surveillance, anything except her own choices. By Tuesday, the family group chat had split in two. 2 days later, Diane left me a voicemail I still replayed. The voicemail wasn't an apology. It was my mother crying just hard enough to sound breakable while still pronouncing every word clearly. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said. You let that woman turn you against your own blood. When this marriage becomes heavier than romance, don't expect me to help you carry it. I saved the message anyway, not because I needed more proof, because I needed a reminder that boundaries are easier to keep when memory stops editing. That was 4 months ago. Since then, life has gotten smaller and better. Emily and I eat dinner at our chipped kitchen table without wedding binders breeding in the corners. We took the money we could still afford and spent one weekend by a lake 2 hours north, where nobody knew our names and the biggest decision was whether to rent kayaks before or after lunch. Aunt Elena comes over on Sundays sometimes and brings too many pastries. Marissa texted once to say she was processing and wants to ask whether I was seriously cutting off Mom over misunderstandings with paperwork. I didn't answer either message right away. For the first time in my life, urgency in my family no longer outranked peace in my home. I did answer Diane once, through email, because written boundaries hold shape better than phone calls. I told her there would be no visits, no drop-ins, and no discussions about reconciliation unless 3 things happened. She repaid the money she diverted, gave a written apology to Emily and Sandra correcting her lies, and agreed to family therapy with an actual licensed therapist. She replied with 2 paragraphs about betrayal and a sentence calling my conditions punitive. That was answer enough. What I learned is simple. Love that demands access without accountability is not love. It's possession with good lighting. And if you grow up inside it, you can mistake your own discomfort for disloyalty for years.